Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a cold, snowy evening somewhere deep in the Korean peninsula, maybe the late 1700s, maybe earlier. The kind of night where your breath fogs up the air faster than a steamed bun cools. Outside, the snow falls like powdered sugar, soft and persistent, blanketing the curved roof tiles of a Hanok house. There's barely any sound, except for the distant crunch of a cartwheel, or a dog half-heartedly barking at the moon. You take off your straw shoes, your cotton socks slightly damp from the icy road, and step inside, and that's when you feel the floor is warm. Not, oh, it's not freezing warm. It's, why does it feel like I'm stepping on toast? Warm. The kind of gentle, radiant heat that doesn't smack you in the face like a fireplace would, but instead seeps up slowly through your feet, into your legs, and then into your whole body like someone just cast a cozy spell. If you were expecting to suffer through the cold like in a Dickens novel, sorry, but ancient Koreans already cracked the code on winter comfort. You wouldn't last a night without this floor. Truly, you wouldn't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Is it snowing there too? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slide the wooden door shut behind you. A soft thud echoes into the stillness. The air smells faintly of pine smoke and boiled barley. Somewhere nearby, someone is frying chestnuts. You pad gently across the floor, trying not to disturb anything, though that's more out of awe than caution. The warm floor beneath your feet doesn't sizzle, doesn't burn. It just exists, quietly, steadily, like the sun decided to go underground and wait for you. You lie down and feel the warmth press into your spine like a slow hug. The paper, windows rattle ever so slightly in the wind, but inside, there's a softness that makes the harshness of winter feel like someone else's problem. This is Ondol. But right now, you don't have a word for it. You just know that this house, this warmth, feels like it understands you. And in that, you realize something. Ancient Koreans weren't just surviving winter. They were thriving in it. You reach for a cotton blanket, stitched with tiny patterns of cranes and clouds, and pull it up to your chest. You breathe, slowly, deeply. The air is cool, but your bones are warm. Somewhere beyond the paper door, you hear a crackle, not firewood. It's the flue, the sound of heated air and smoke running through the hidden tunnels beneath the floor, an underground river of comfort flowing just for you. And that's where the story really begins. You weren't always in this room. Earlier today, you were on a long road north, maybe delivering rice to your cousin, or maybe just wandering. You don't remember. You only remember how your breath froze on your lips, how your fingers forgot what softness felt like. And then this house, this warmth. Someone invited you in. An old man with silver eyebrows and a robe too long. He didn't ask questions, just pointed to the spot on the floor and said, "Sit." You did? And now you're still here, hours later, like a cat unwilling to leave a sunny windowsill. He told you stories about how this village still heats homes like their great-grandparents did, about how kings slept on warm jade floors and farmers baked sweet potatoes under their beds. You might have dozed off at one point. He didn't seem to mind. He mentioned that Ondol wasn't some newfangled invention. Our ancestors, he said, they were cold, just like us, but smarter. Apparently, traces of Ondol-like structures date back to Korea's Bronze Age, some even older. And while other civilizations were roasting their toes by open hearths, Koreans were busy designing heat flow systems under the floor, using fire, stone, and a wicked sense of efficiency. Imagine explaining that to a medieval European. Yes, we burn things, but then we make the heat travel under our house before it escapes. I mean, honestly, that's like turning your house into a human-sized crock-pot. You shift slightly, and the warmth hugs a new part of your body. You can hear the snow still tapping gently on the roof. The paper window glows softly from moonlight, just enough to see the ceiling beams overhead. Why doesn't everyone do this, you think? But the answer is surprisingly simple. Not everyone could. This system, Ondol, required more than just fire and stone. It needed planning, architecture, the right kind of fuel, the right layout. You had to know how to direct heat under the floor, when to open the flue, how to avoid suffocating from carbon monoxide, which, yes, sometimes happened, though the villagers never liked to talk about that part. Some historians still debate whether Ondol spread from necessity or luxury. Was it something every farmer had? Or was it a perk of the noble Yangban class? The records are a little fuzzy, partly because paper doesn't survive fire all that well. But the presence of Ondol, even in modest homes, suggests a cultural commitment to warmth, not just surviving winter, but making it pleasant. The old man snores faintly in the corner now. You wonder if he built this house with his own hands. The floor doesn't creak. The stones below you are arranged with care. Heat travels evenly, like water in a stream. And now, in this very moment, you're part of that stream. The world outside is cold, indifferent. But in here, under this roof, above this ancient floor, you are wrapped in the warmth of centuries, a quiet technology born of cold winters and clever minds. Your eyes grow heavier, the crackling grows softer. Maybe you'll sleep now, or maybe you'll stay awake just a little longer to hear what happens next. You're not dreaming, though it's getting harder to tell. At some point during the night, the snow must have stopped. The silence outside has taken on that strange, cottony quality that only comes after a storm. Even the moon looks tired. The floor is still warm. And not just physically, it's the kind of warmth that settles your breathing, softens your shoulders, and makes your thoughts drift slower than usual. Like you've been invited into a world with fewer expectations. That's when you start to wonder, where did this all begin? Not just this house, but the whole idea of heating a home from beneath. Because Ondol wasn't an accident. It wasn't just some guy poking at the ground and thinking, hey, what if we burned stuff under here? Nope. To get to Ondol, you have to go back, way back. Back to the Neolithic period, yes, really, where archaeologists found remnants of primitive floor heating in northern Korea. Imagine, hunters and gatherers, tired from chasing wild pigs and trying not to freeze, stumbling upon the idea of running fire underneath the ground. They didn't call it Ondol, one part, of course. They didn't call it anything, but the concept was already there, a cooking pit, angled stones, a passage that directed smoke sideways instead of up. That was the proto-Ondol, a humble beginning for what would become the toasty genius we know today. And here's the kicker. This happened thousands of years before Romans installed hypocaust systems in their villas, while Europe was still figuring out how to not burn. Down their thatched roofs, people in Korea were already walking barefoot in winter. You smile a little. Suddenly, you feel like you've joined a very exclusive club, the Society of Warm Floor Appreciators. You sit up slightly, propping yourself on one elbow. The blanket slides down your shoulder, and the cool air brushes your skin. Not enough to make you cold, just enough to remind you that the warmth is something worth noticing. Across the room, the fire must have died down. But the floor? Still radiating. That's the beauty of Ondol. It's not about constant burning, it's about retention. The floor beneath you is made of stone slabs, supported by an underground flue system called gore. When someone burns fuel in the kitchen fireplace, the heat and smoke are directed through those channels. The stones absorb the warmth slowly and release it gradually. The result? Hours, sometimes a whole day, of warmth, even after the fire's out. It's efficient, elegant, kind of smug, honestly, like the house is whispering, oh, you thought winter would win? How cute. And here's a fun detail. The word Ondol literally means warm stone. It's that simple. No marketing jargon, no ancient branding campaign with slogans like, Experience the Stone Age spa in your home. Just 2 words: warm, stone. But don't let the simplicity fool you. The engineering was genius. Over time, builders refined the structure. They learned how to adjust the slope of the flue for better air draw, how to angle the kitchen firebox for maximum heat distribution. Some even figured out that stacking certain kinds of stones, ones with different thermal properties, could prolong warmth by several hours. We're talking Bronze Age HVAC technicians, folks, except they probably wore straw sandals and chewed tree bark to brush their teeth. Still, give them credit. Their houses were warmer than most drafty castles in Europe. You rub your hand against the smooth floor. The surface isn't polished, just worn by generations of footsteps, naps, and quiet winters. It feels like time itself has settled into the grain, and you think about the people who lived here before you: farmers, healers, poets, children who invented games to pass long snow days, elders who sat cross-legged telling tales of tiger spirits and river dragons, all of them warmed by the same invisible force underfoot. What makes it even more beautiful is this: Ondol wasn't reserved for kings. Sure, palace Ondols were fancier, some even had carved vents and ceramic tiles. But the basic principle existed across the social spectrum. From humble cottages to Confucian academies, people found a way to stay warm. Of course, you didn't just get heat for free. Someone had to tend the fire. Often, that someone was the woman of the house, waking before dawn, crouching by the hearth, coaxing life into a pile of wood and ash. That's where the story gets real, because while the heat feels magical, it came with effort. Fuel had to be gathered: wood, twigs, dried rice husks, anything that burned. In mountainous regions, people sometimes hauled bundles of pine needles on their backs just to make it through the month. In poorer areas, they even burned dried animal dung. Relax, you're not sleeping on that part of the floor. And then there's the smoke. Modern chimneys pull smoke upward and away. But Ondol systems, they ran smoke horizontally underneath the living area before venting it out. It worked, yes, but if something clogged the flue or the wind blew the wrong way, guess where that smoke went? Yup, right into the room. That's why families kept a smoke stick near the wall, a long wooden pole used to tap the chimney from the outside and dislodge blockages. You didn't want your cozy evening turning into a lightheaded nap you never woke up from. Still, most nights, it worked beautifully. Some historians still debate whether the earliest Ondol systems were intended for warmth or cooking first. Did they want heated floors? Or did they just happen to notice, hey, my soup is hot and my toes are toasty? No one really knows. But the fact that the practice endured, from Neolithic huts to modern skyscrapers, suggests they were onto something. You lie back down and close your eyes for a moment. The warmth wraps around your legs like a weighted blanket. Your breath evens out. Your heartbeat slows. You're not in a museum exhibit. You're not watching a documentary. You're just here, in a warm house, in a quiet moment, somewhere, between then and now. Maybe that's the magic of Ondol. Not just the warmth, but the way it invites you to slow down, pay attention, and be still, even if it's just for one night. The floor is still warm. It's a different kind of warmth now. Not blazing like a campfire, not prickly like an electric heater. No, this is the kind of heat that seeps into your bones, slow and steady, like a lullaby whispered by the ground itself. It's subtle but persistent. Like a cat that's decided your lap is the center of the universe. As you lie there, eyes half closed, your mind wanders to a different kind of fire, the one that drove ancient Koreans to refine this system over generations. Because Ondol didn't just appear and stay the same for 2,000 years. It evolved, and in the era of kingdoms, Goguryeo, Baekje, Silla, the warm floor became something more than practical. It became cultural, symbolic, even a little political. Let's go with Goguryeo first. Around the 4th century CE, homes in the northern regions were getting serious upgrades. You've got stone-lined flues, floor slabs meticulously arranged to trap heat, and vent holes carved with what can only be described as ancient HVAC swagger. In fact, Goguryeo-style Ondol was so effective, Chinese envoys visiting the area apparently found it confusing. Like, why are your houses so warm when it's snowing outside? What sorcery is this? And the Koreans, in their eternal politeness, probably just smiled and handed them a warm rice cake. Here's the part that might surprise you. Ondol wasn't just for homes. Monasteries used it, schools used it, even military barracks used it. Yes, Korean soldiers had warm floors, while their counterparts in other empires were huddling by campfires trying not to get frostbite in their chainmail. Korean troops were theoretically sleeping on gently heated stone. I mean, probably still uncomfortable, but, less miserable. That's the part most people forget. Even back then, there was a deep understanding that warmth isn't a luxury, it's survival. And more than that, it's dignity. Now, imagine this. You're a visiting official. During the unified Silla period, it's winter. Your horse is grumpy. Your legs are frozen. But when you arrive at the host's house, they usher you into a chamber with a gently glowing floor. You sit, cross-legged and slowly. So slowly, you thaw. Your brain stops fixating on your frostbitten toes. Your shoulders drop. You can finally think again. There's a reason Silla scholars wrote entire poems dedicated to their winter studies. Warm floors, quiet nights, and stacks of bamboo scrolls. It was like a public library. If the library smelled faintly of roasted barley and soot, even Confucian academies leaned into this. The floor wasn't just physical support, it became a mental one. A student could sit for hours copying texts, memorizing proverbs, not because he was particularly studious, but because his butt wasn't freezing off. And now, your favorite part, a weird fact. During the Joseon dynasty, builders would sometimes use red clay mixed with soybean paste to coat the flue tunnels. Why? Well, the clay helped insulate, and the fermented paste was antimicrobial. That's right. Your floor was basically sealed with spicy miso. You imagine lying down and catching a faint whiff of soup as you drift off. Earthy, with notes of fermented enlightenment. Some modern historians still scratch their heads about this. Was it sanitation, superstition, leftover lunch? The answer, as always, is yes, and probably more. Outside, the wind picks up. The branches of a distant pine tree tap against the wall like they're asking to come inside. You listen to the rhythm, slow, irregular, almost like a forgotten metronome. It's oddly comforting. You shift slightly, letting your shoulder settle into a new patch of floor that's just a bit warmer than the rest. Like nature left you a little heating bonus, and you wonder, who slept here before you? Was it a scholar? A noblewoman? A child dreaming of catching a tiger in the hills? Whoever it was, they felt this exact same warmth. Maybe even complained about, the kitchen fire's too strong again, and then fell asleep mid-grumble. That's the other magic of Ondol. It's one of the rare inventions that connects us not just through time, but through comfort. Fire might be primal, but a warm floor, that's civilization. Oh, and before you nod off completely, let's debunk a myth. Some folks think Ondol was only for the elite, that peasants huddled in smoke-filled huts while nobles sipped hot tea on radiant floors. But archaeology tells a different story. Excavations of commoners' homes, even modest one-room dwellings, show clear signs of Ondol structures. The design was simpler, sure, but the principle was the same. Warm the family, save the fuel, survive the winter. That's the part that hits you. The system wasn't just brilliant, it was accessible. Everyone got a little slice of the genius. Whether you were a farmer or a philosopher, you deserved not to freeze. And Korea, unlike a lot of places, actually did something about it. You take a slow breath. Your fingertips graze the floor again, this time out of affection. You've come to think of it like an old friend, reliable, gentle, quietly present. The kind of friend who doesn't say much, but always knows when you need a little extra warmth. It's funny. You came here to relax, maybe fall asleep. But instead, you've stumbled into the coziest history lesson of your life. And best of all, there's more, so much more to explore. But for now, you close your eyes again, letting your body melt into the floor's embrace. You hear the softest creak from the old wooden beam above. The fire's out. The night is deep, but the floor is still warm. The floor is still warm, and by now, you're starting to suspect it always has been. It's like the heat comes from more than just firewood. It feels ancestral, like all the conversations, naps, spilled soups, and midnight confessions that have taken place on this very floor have left a little warmth behind. Some kind of thermal ghost, the cozy kind. You roll over slightly, cheek pressed to the mat. The stones underneath hum like a tired lullaby, steady and unbothered. You're not thinking about work tomorrow, or the dishes, or the fact that your left sock has somehow disappeared into the void. No, right now, you're thinking about chimneys, not the Western kind sticking up from rooftops like lonely brick hats. No, Korean chimneys were different. They were squat, sturdy things, barely taller than your knees, tucked into the farthest edge of the house like shy little turtles. They weren't built for flair. They were built to finish the journey, because after the fire passed under the floor, winding through stone tunnels, it had to exit somewhere. And that somewhere was the chimney, often located on the outer wall of the master bedroom, just beyond the Ondol platform. Imagine that, the last breath of a fire whispering goodnight as it slips into the cold air. Now here's a tiny marvel of design. Many chimneys were topped with flat stones or tiles to keep out rain and snow. Smart. But some also had small holes chiseled into the top slab. These weren't random. They were venting systems, yes, but they also made a soft whistling noise when the wind blew just right. Basically, your house came with lo-fi ambient sound. Nature's own white noise machine. You can picture it now. You snuggled under layers of cotton-stuffed quilts, listening to the faint hiss of heat traveling beneath you, accompanied by a high, gentle whistle from outside, like a tea kettle that refuses to boil over. Some historians argue the sound had spiritual value, keeping away evil spirits with its tune. Others say it was purely functional. But honestly, when something this charming exists, who needs just one explanation? Time for your weird fact of the night. Some wealthier households, particularly during late Goryeo and early Joseon periods, developed a two-chimney system. Why? Because they wanted to steer the warmth. With multiple flues and exits, they could redirect heat flow to different rooms or cut it off entirely from parts of the house they weren't using. It's like having a 14th century version of smart heating minus the app notifications. Hey, your porch is now 3 degrees warmer. Also, your neighbor just borrowed your goat. That part might be speculation. But the flue control? Very real. Now picture yourself as a master builder in the Joseon dynasty. You arrive at a village to design a new home. The family wants a 3-room layout with the kitchen at one end and the master bedroom at the other. What do? Well, you design the flue path to snake beneath the sleeping quarters, starting at the kitchen hearth. You account for gradient, draw angles with a string and a stick, and argue with the uncle who insists the floor needs to be at least 10 degrees toastier. There's no concrete, no digital thermometer, no margin for error, just heat, stone, airflow, and a kind of confidence that only comes from decades of passing secrets through calloused hands. Builders weren't just craftsmen, they were thermal strategists. Speaking of strategy, there's a subtle hierarchy in the Ondol layout. Traditionally, the master or eldest person in the house slept closest to the chimney, the warmest spot. Younger family members or guests slept farther from the source where the warmth dwindled. And it wasn't just about respect, it was practicality. Older folks needed more heat. Children? Built-in heaters of chaos. Of course, sometimes a cheeky nephew would try to sneak closer to the chimney at night. But there was always that one sharp-eyed aunt who'd shoo them back with a stern look and a rolled-up fan. The hierarchy was gentle, but it was enforced. By now, the fire has gone out. But you're still warm, not just from the floor, but from the feeling that someone, somewhere, designed all this, not just for survival, but for comfort. They didn't need to go this far, but they did, and now, centuries later, here you are. On the same kind of floor, in the same kind of quiet. Your breath softens, your mind drifts, and suddenly you realize there's still a little heat left in the stones, just enough to get you through the night. The floor is still warm, not as warm as before, maybe. But it's there, steady, like the heartbeat of the house. It hasn't asked anything of you, it just stays. Supporting your back, holding your weight, giving you exactly what you didn't know you needed. And tonight, you've decided to stay right here and think about kitchens. More specifically, Korean kitchens of the past, which were quite literally the heart of the home. Not just emotionally, but thermally, because the magic of the Ondol system starts there, with a fire that serves a double purpose. Cook the food, heat the floor, efficient, elegant, a little smoky. You imagine crouching by an old soot-stained hearth where cast iron pots bubble with seaweed soup and rice steams under a lid weighed down with a smooth rock. The fire beneath crackles as it snakes into the flue, warming the sleeping quarters beyond. The kitchen isn't just a place to prepare meals, it's the starting point of comfort. Here's your odd, barely believable fact of the night. In some regions during the Joseon period, women timed their household schedules by the warmth of the floor. No, seriously. Instead of using a clock, they'd touch the stone platform near the sleeping area. Still warm? Okay, we've got about an hour before the stew needs to come off. Or, barely warm? The fire's dying. We better finish the laundry quick. So, yes, the floor was your timer, your weather app, your central heating, your life calendar. Back to that kitchen. It wasn't glamorous. Most were dug slightly below ground level to keep the flames stable and sheltered from wind. You step down into it, ducking under the low beam, and your hands instinctively reach for the soot-darkened wall for balance. Everything smells like firewood, sesame oil, and brass bowls stacked on high shelves. You feel the dry crackle of kindling, the echoing pop of pine resin catching flame. The flue system beneath your feet wakes up stretching like a yawning cat. The stones begin to drink in the heat, and just like that, the cycle starts again. Now, while you're warm and comfy, let's talk about labor. Because here's a small, gentle truth. Ondol systems didn't run on good vibes and fire alone. Someone had to build them, maintain them, feed them, and in most homes that someone was, you guessed it, the woman of the house. She'd rise before dawn, haul wood, light the fire, cook breakfast, and, without even realizing, heat the entire sleeping area. Her fire had to be balanced. Too weak and the rice wouldn't cook. Too strong and the flue might crack or the floor scorch. There's something quietly heroic in that kind of precision. No medals, no applause, just a warm room, a full belly, and a family still asleep as she stirs the soup. Let's take a moment to appreciate another unsung detail. The choice of fuel, oak, pine, dried crop stalks, even animal dung in the leanest seasons. And this part's important, ashes weren't just thrown out. They were repurposed, mixed into compost, used to make lye for soap, sometimes even sprinkled outside to keep pests away. Everything was part of a loop, nothing wasted. Even the ashes got a second act. At this point, you've probably realized something comforting about all this. The more you learn, the more it becomes clear. The Ondol system wasn't just about fire or architecture or clever air tunnels. It was about rhythm, the rhythm of waking early to tend the hearth, of the day unfolding with the warmth that passed beneath your feet, of evenings where the fire burned low and the family gathered close, not because the TV was on, but because the warmest part of the room demanded it. Imagine that. designing a home where people want to sit together, simply because the floor invites them. Even your grumpiest cousin would have to come by, eventually. Outside, you can almost hear the sound of a wood bundle being set down, the scrape of straw sandals, the rattle of metal fire tongs. Maybe it's just your imagination. Or maybe it's the house remembering, because houses do that, you know. They remember routines. They remember laughter and footsteps and burnt porridge and lullabies hummed half asleep. And in the Ondol, they hold all that memory in the stones. So, as you lie there, eyes closed, toes curling slightly against the soft pad, you don't just feel warmth, you feel continuity. Like you're part of the loop now, too. The kitchen fire has done its job, and so have you. So rest now. The floor's got you. The floor is warmer tonight, or maybe you're just noticing it more. That kind of quiet heat that wraps around your joints and works its way into your bones. Not urgent, not flashy, just persistent. Like a sleepy dog curling up next to you and refusing to move. And somehow, this time the warmth brings with it the faint smell of ink. Because tonight, your thoughts drift to scholars, specifically. Korean scholars who sat on these heated floors, scrolls spread out before them, bamboo brushes in hand, and hours of writing to do by candlelight. It's not exactly the glamorous academic life. There was no coffee shop playlist, no ergonomic chair, no second monitor to distract them with cat videos, just heat from below, cold air at the door, and a whole lot of poetry waiting to happen. You hear a soft scratch, not a mouse. Relax. It's just your imagination conjuring the bristle of a brush against Hanji paper. Scholar officials, or Hyangban, in the Joseon dynasty didn't just read and write. They lived it, and they did so mostly on the floor. That's right. The Ondol wasn't just for sleeping and soup digestion. It was also the preferred work setting for the ruling literati class. A mat, a low table, a brush stand, and maybe a cup of pine needle tea. That's your entire office setup. Imagine a civil servant today typing government reports while sitting crisscross applesauce on a heated tile. That's the vibe, weird fact, of the night. Some scholars believed that warmth from the floor helped their concentration. Yes, actual journal entries mention this, that when their feet were cold, their thoughts felt scattered. But once the Ondol was lit, their minds moved like ink, fluid, confident, maybe even a little poetic. There's no modern scientific study on this, but honestly, it tracks. You try thinking about taxes with frozen toes. Doesn't work. But give your ankles a little thermal encouragement, and suddenly you're quoting Laozi. Here's something charming. The ink stones scholars used, those beautifully carved flat dishes for grinding ink, were often slightly warmed by the floor beneath. Them, not intentionally, just ambient heat doing its thing. But scholars noticed that the warmed stone made the ink smoother, less clumpy, more obedient, like it understood the mood of the room and decided to cooperate. Now picture that, a room dimly lit, the smell of pine smoke in the air, a scholar murmuring a line of verse, pausing, grinding the ink, watching it swirl, then writing with a sigh that's mostly satisfaction. Meanwhile, his cat's tail lazily flicks across the edge of the scroll. Of course, not all writing was poetic. The Guajo exams, those notoriously difficult civil service exams, meant hours and days of memorizing Confucian texts. A scholar could spend a decade preparing, and one tiny mistake, miswriting a character, misquoting a passage, could mean failure, and they still did this on the floor. In winter, the floor helped their focus. In summer, it made them miss winter. The exams were so intense, people literally fainted from stress. But at least the floor had their back, literally. Some historians argue that the combination of strict mental discipline and physical comfort created a uniquely stable class of scholar bureaucrats. Others say it was just a good excuse to nap between stanzas, and here's a quiet little moment that probably happened thousands of times. A scholar, overwhelmed by a particularly stubborn sentence, puts down his brush. He leans back. He lies flat, his head resting on a folded robe. The warmth of the floor soaks into his spine. He stares at the rafters. The wind nudges the paper screen, and just before he dozes off, he thinks, I should have become a potter instead. You've had that moment too, haven't you? Not about pottery maybe, but that soft surrender to stillness when thinking has stopped being useful, and warmth has started sounding like a pretty good plan. Let's not forget the kids. Young students, studying for the Seodang village schools, also used Ondol floors for writing, repeating Confucian maxims until they stuck. Their ink-stained sleeves and sleepy chants filled the winter air with a kind of gentle rhythm. You can almost hear it now. Filial piety, honesty. Don't fall asleep on the scroll. But inevitably, one of them would. Face down in a half-finished essay, and the ink would smudge into his cheek, leaving him with a temporary tattoo that read something like rectitude. There is no record of what the teachers thought of this, but probably a sigh, maybe a fond one. Back in your imaginary scholar's room, the candle is burning low. The inkstone is cooling. Outside, a breeze passes. The house exhales, and beneath you, the warmth doesn't fade. It lingers. Because even centuries ago, they knew the best ideas don't come from tension. They come when you're still, comfortable, and just a little too warm to get up. So stay there. Let the scroll wait. Even poetry can take a night off. The floor greets you like an old friend. No sudden rush of heat. Just that familiar slow warmth that feels like it's been waiting for you. The kind of warmth that says, hey, no rush. Take your time. Maybe don't move at all today. And, honestly, you don't plan to. Because tonight, we're not writing essays or cooking stews. Tonight you're bathing. Well, not you exactly, but someone a few centuries back in the chilly hills of the Korean peninsula who just stepped out of a communal bathhouse, steam still clinging to their skin, and now they're lying belly down on a freshly heated Ondol floor, sighing in what might be the first true joy of winter. See, bathing was more than just hygiene. It was ceremony, community, an act of seasonal resistance, and afterward, the floor became part of the ritual. In noble households and small country homes alike, post-bath moments often ended with a long, dreamy sprawl across the Ondol. Picture someone wrapped in soft cotton, hair still damp, cheeks flushed from hot water, just letting the floor dry them inside and out, kind of like a slow cooker for humans. Let's take a detour into a fun fact. Korean bathhouses, even in earlier dynasties, sometimes had heated floors inside the changing rooms. That's right. Before you even got to the warm water, the building itself was already hugging your feet. It's like being handed a hot towel before your massage. And sure, the facilities weren't luxurious by modern standards. Think big copper pots, buckets, and a lot of mutual scrubbing. But the warmth was deluxe. In the depths of winter, a heated floor under bare toes was basically spa-level indulgence. You hear it, don't you? The shh of straw slippers sliding across polished stone, the bubbling sound of water from a bathhouse. Boiler. The faint laughter of people stepping outside, steam rising from their shoulders like tiny clouds, and then the silence of rest. Because after all the splashing and scrubbing, the body finally gets to do what it secretly wanted all. A long collapse onto warm rock, sigh deeply, and give in to gravity. There's something disarmingly tender about this image. A whole household, or maybe a trio of old women lying side by side on the floor, towels over their eyes, not saying a word. You don't need words when the heat is doing all the talking. One might wiggle her toes, another might hum an old folk tune under her breath. But mostly, it's just the sound of contentment. In fact, some elders swore that the post-bath floor nap was better than the bath itself, probably because the floor never judged you for dozing off with your hair still wet. And while we're here, let's talk about scent. Post-bath, the floor didn't just feel good, it smelled good. especially if it had recently been fed with pine or fragrant woods. The mix of steam-soaked skin and the subtle resinous smoke of the Ondol created what might have been the earliest form of aromatherapy. Forget your diffusers. This was heat-powered tranquility with a hint of forest. And if someone in the household had simmered herbs over the kitchen fire earlier that day, maybe perilla leaves or dried mugwort, that scent would sneak in too, just enough to make you sleepy or hungrier than you expected. Now here's your little-known detail of the night. Some homes would sprinkle the floor with light mats infused with medicinal herbs during winter, especially after baths. The idea? That the lingering heat would release the herbs' oils slowly, like a natural vapor rub for your entire nervous system. You weren't just lying on a floor, you were lying on a prescription. Doctors of the era even recommended this technique for colds, joint pain, and, wait for it, restless dreaming. Imagine that. Heated floor therapy for your overactive imagination. Can someone please bring that back? Eventually, the warmth makes your eyelids heavier. You don't even notice it at first, just that your limbs aren't bothering to lift anymore. Your breath has slowed. You're one with the floor. You know how people say, get grounded when you're anxious? This is that. Literally. No mindfulness app, no breathing technique. Just you, a stone floor, and about 600 years of ancestral naps telling you, you're doing great. You feel the day melt off. You feel the softness under your ribs, and maybe, just maybe, you start to understand why generations built their homes around this system, not just for practicality, but for peace. So, go ahead, curl into that peace. The bath is long over. The steam has faded, but the warmth, it's still here, and so are you. The floor's warmth greets your spine before your brain even catches up. It's that kind of slow realization, the oh right, I'm still here, still warm, still not moving kind of feeling, like waking up halfway through a nap and deciding with conviction to keep napping. And tonight, that's completely acceptable. Because in this chapter of your sleepy historical journey, you're not a scholar or a cook or a bathhouse daydreamer. You're a guest, and you're about to learn that in ancient Korea, being someone's house. Guest meant one thing above all: you would never, ever be allowed to leave cold. Hospitality was sacred, as in spiritual, moral, almost competitive in its intensity. When someone came to visit, friend, cousin, that one guy from the neighboring village who always shows up unannounced, you did the same thing every time. You lit the fire under the floor, not because it was cold out, though it probably was. Not because someone asked, they wouldn't need to, but because the guest deserved warmth, period, and not just figuratively. You literally had to heat up the house. It was the physical embodiment of welcome. You didn't say, make yourself at home. You said, let me light the Ondol. There's a beautiful practicality to it. In some houses, they'd stoke the fire just before a guest arrived, timing it so that by the time the tea was poured and the initial greetings were exchanged, the floor was softly radiating that toasty, back-of-your-knees kind of heat. You'd sit down on the mat and immediately think, oh no, I'm never leaving, and that was the point. In Korean culture, even today, hospitality isn't about impressing, it's about comforting, about making someone so physically cozy they forget about their journey, their worries, their shoes, their return trip, which is to say, you were expected to stay a while or forever. No pressure. Here's your quirky detail of the night. In some noble households, guest chambers had their own separate Ondol channels, isolated from the main family system. Why? So the guest wouldn't feel guilty for using up the host's firewood. That's right. They invented guilt-free underfloor heating before we figured out smart thermostats. Can you imagine? Oh, don't worry. This room heats itself. Totally independent. Lie down. It's hospitality crossed with passive-aggressive energy efficiency. And sure, there were rules. Guests brought small offerings, rice cakes, fermented goodies, maybe some dried persimmons. But once inside, they weren't expected to lift a finger. The host prepared warm tea or a bowl of juk, a gentle, sleepy rice porridge that's basically edible kindness, and then gestured toward the floor with a knowing look that meant, "You're safe now. Sit. Melt." You shift a little, letting your imaginary hip settle into a slightly toastier tile, because this is what the floor was made for, not just survival, but softness. You hear two elderly women chuckling in a side room, the soft clink of teacups. One of them says something about the guest sleeping like a cat. The other replies, "That's the best kind of guest, doesn't steal anything, just sheds." You suspect that's about you. Later in the evening, maybe a child toddles into the guest room with sticky rice crumbs on his face, plops down next to your imagined form, and uses your arm as a pillow. No one says anything. This is fine. Everyone is slowly becoming furniture, and as the wind nudges the wooden shutters, someone slides another log into the furnace outside, just in case the floor even thinks about cooling. This, you realize, is the kind of hospitality that doesn't stop at offering you warmth. It becomes warmth. Historians sometimes wonder how deeply these customs shaped the social glue of Korea. There's a theory, unproven but charming, that the emphasis on physical comfort for guests helped prevent conflicts, that a warm floor, shared tea, and sleepy post-lunch conversations built friendships faster than any formal ceremony, because you can't really hold a grudge when you're slowly sliding into dreamland on a heated rock slab. And even if there were tense negotiations or awkward family dynamics, the floor was always neutral ground. Everyone's equal when horizontal. Eventually, the night stretches. The host brings out heavier blankets. No one mentions leaving. You, dear guest, are now essentially a houseplant, and that's exactly right. Let your imagined limbs grow heavier. Let the warmth wrap your calves like soft vines. Let your breathing match the rhythm of the crackling outside, that steady heartbeat of ember and ash. You're not in a stranger's house anymore. You're part of the floor, and in ancient Korea, that means you're home. You've been here so long now, the floor knows your name. It doesn't speak, of course, but there's a quiet understanding, a mutual agreement between body and stone. We are good here. No alarms, no rushing, just the slow exchange of warmth, as steady as a heartbeat. And as you settle deeper into the heated embrace of this quiet moment, your thoughts drift. Because now it's time to meet the true unsung heroes of this system. The firekeepers, the people who made all this warmth possible, long before you sprawled out in comfort. Because for every toasty floor, there was someone hunched over a fire pit in the freezing morning light, coaxing flames to life with patience, skill, and a slight cough from the smoke. In smaller homes, this job usually fell to the head of the Yeoa household, or more realistically, to the person who got up earliest and liked to complain the least. That person lit the agungi, the cooking stove, which doubled as the Ondol's heat source. 2 birds, 1 stove. Pretty genius. While breakfast bubbled in a pot above, the smoke and heat snuck under the floor and made their way through stone channels. The food cooked, the floor warmed, and everyone eventually got up wondering why life wasn't like this all the time. Meanwhile, the firekeeper, still squatting in the cold, poking at kindling with half-frozen fingers. They were the reason anyone could feel their toes by lunchtime. But in bigger homes, or especially in royal or aristocratic estates, there were dedicated staff just for maintaining the Ondol system. Imagine your only job being keep the floors warm. That's it. Not just a fireplace guy, a full-time human radiator operator. And let me tell you, it was not a glamorous gig. You worked in the back, behind the walls, shoveling pine branches or rice straw into the hearth. You carried heavy loads of fuel, dodged smoke, and sometimes sang little songs to make the hours pass. One such tune, according to one delightfully obscure 18th century anecdote, included the line, "If the noble's feet are cold, my ears will burn," which sounds poetic, but also kind of like a workplace hazard. Here's your delightfully weird historical tidbit. Some elite homes trained their Ondol staff to listen to the floor. No, really, there are old accounts of firekeepers tapping their ears against the heated stones to judge whether the warmth had reached far enough into the guest chambers. Too warm. You risked cracking the tiles. Too cold? Your noble patron might throw a very passive-aggressive poetry reading about it. So, you had to get it just right. It was like being a floor sommelier, judging temperature by intuition and vibe alone. You wiggle your toes as if in appreciation, because now you know, behind every perfect nap, every sigh of relief, there was someone in the shadows tending embers, and they took pride in it. Firekeeping wasn't flashy, but it was fundamental. Entire families structured their mornings around it. Children learned the art of kindling as one of their earliest chores, like tying shoes or remembering to bow politely. You weren't really part of the household until you knew how to start. The fire, and in the harsh winters of the Joseon dynasty, that skill meant more than comfort. It meant survival. Outside your imagined warm chamber, snowflakes land softly on thatched roofs. A thin column of smoke rises against the pale gray sky. In the back, near the furnace, someone shifts a log and watches sparks swirl up like sleepy fireflies. There's a practiced rhythm to it. They know exactly how long the wood needs. They know exactly when to close the flue. It's not flashy. It's not celebrated. But in this quiet, you realize that's the kind of care that holds a house together. Historians still debate who invented which part of the Ondol system first, whether it evolved from earlier Chinese techniques or arose independently in the Korean peninsula. There are stone heating remains going back thousands of years, especially in the north. Some archaeologists point to Neolithic dwellings in Manchuria with fire channel floors. Others argue that the uniquely Korean version, using direct smoke flues under thick stone slabs, didn't appear until the early kingdoms, like Goguryeo. But the point isn't when it started, it's that someone kept it going. Generation after generation. Through invasion, famine, reform, industrialization, and still somehow the floor stayed warm. You can argue over blueprints and origin myths, but you can't argue with a full belly, warm feet, and the smell of pine smoke at dawn. You shift again, letting the heat find your shoulder blades. Behind the walls, in some forgotten corner, you can almost hear the soft crack of wood, the hum of someone stoking the flame. A small, persistent act of kindness, repeated over centuries, and without them, you'd be cold right now. So, yeah, maybe send a little mental thank you to all the nameless hands that made the world a little softer under your spine. They didn't ask for praise, just that you feel warm. And you do. By now, the floor feels less like a surface and more like a gentle creature breathing under you, slow, steady, and deeply invested in your relaxation. And the best part? It's not just keeping you warm, it's whispering stories, because you're not the only one who's lain here, lulled by the soft thrum of heated stone. For centuries, this is where secrets were shared, letters were read aloud, and most curiously of all, medical treatments were administered. Yes, in ancient Korea, if you were feeling a little off, say, some stomach trouble, sluggish energy, a cold that just wouldn't quit, one of the first things a traditional doctor might ask was, "Have you been sleeping on a cold floor?" Welcome to one of the lesser-known but charming chapters in the history of medicine, Ondol-based wellness. Traditional Korean medicine, influenced by both indigenous beliefs and the humoral theories of East Asia, held that heat, especially from below, was essential for maintaining balance in the body. Too much cold? That meant stagnation, energy stuck, fluids not flowing. An immune system doing the medieval equivalent of shrugging its shoulders and walking off the job. So what was the prescription? Lay down, on the floor. Let the stones fix you. There's even a word for it in older texts, ji-yok, or earth, warmth. It wasn't just therapeutic, it was considered elemental. Many traditional households use the Ondol not just for general comfort, but as a kind of healing platform. And no, not like a yoga mat, more like a full-body toast. You'd be told to rest longer than usual, sometimes for days, wrapped in thick blankets, slowly absorbing heat like a very cozy potato. And honestly, it worked better than some of the other treatments going around at the time. Because remember, this was an era where other medical interventions might involve burning dried centipedes, wearing a jade beetle pendant, or drinking deer antler tea that definitely tasted like despair. So, yes, lying on a toasty floor was the luxury option. Here's your oddly charming historical tidbit of the night. Some aristocratic families built sick rooms with especially deep and wide Ondol flues designed to crank the heat up during recovery. One nobleman from the late 17th century even wrote in his diary that he faked a cough for 2 days just to get assigned to the warmest chamber. We don't know his name, but we salute him. A true pioneer of the sick day for naps movement. Back to you in the warmth. Imagine your body slowly sinking with the rhythm of the stones below. The kind of alignment that doesn't come from chiropractic cracks or intense massages, but from stillness and time. Maybe a practitioner comes in. She lays a small pouch of mugwort next to you. Its scent subtle, earthy, and believed to ward off chill from the inside out. She checks your pulse, mumbles something about wind in the liver, which, don't worry, was a thing back then, and then gestures for you to keep resting. No medicine, no lecture, just more warmth. It's said that even court physicians of the Joseon dynasty recommended Ondol therapy for insomnia. Apparently, a few especially cranky royal advisors had trouble sleeping due to cold in the bones, which, if you've ever camped without a sleeping pad, you totally understand. The cure? No herbs, no acupuncture. Just move their beds closer to the fire channel. Problem solved. Modern historians might debate the efficacy of these methods, though to be fair, many of them now admit that radiant floor heating has real health benefits. Muscle relaxation, improved circulation, better sleep. And let's be honest, it beats leeches. But what's really striking is the intention behind it. To heal someone in ancient Korea wasn't just about purging bad humors or balancing mystical energies. It was about giving them space, time, warmth, which, funnily enough, are still what most of us need when we're unwell or overwhelmed or just very tired on a Tuesday night. You shift slightly, letting the weight of imagined blankets settle across your chest. The heat is gentle now, less hearth and more hug. Maybe that's the real medicine, being allowed to stop moving, to melt into stone and know that for a little while, nothing is expected of you except to be warm, to breathe, to nap, to not be heroic, just comfortable. So if you've been feeling a little out of balance yourself, emotionally, spiritually, metabolically, maybe this is your moment. You don't need a mugwort poultice, just stay here. Let your bones sigh, and let the floor do the rest. By now, you've almost forgotten what it's like to be cold. Your limbs are so at ease, your breath so deep and slow, it feels like the floor isn't just under you, it's part of you, like you've fused with the warmth, become some kind of highly relaxed salamander human hybrid, one that pays taxes and also naps professionally. And just when you think this story can't get any cozier, we enter the golden era of domestic genius. Because yes, we've talked about how the Ondol was used for comfort, survival, even healing. But in traditional Korean homes, it was also part of the daily household rhythm, a quietly clever system woven into every layer of family life. And nowhere is this more charming than in how people use the floor to multitask. Let's start with a surprising fact. People dried their laundry on the floor. Yes, right on it. Not on a clothesline, not draped over bushes, on the Ondol. Especially in winter, when hanging laundry outside was just asking for a shirt-shaped icicle. Instead, they'd Lay clothes flat across the heated stone, smoothing out wrinkles with a hand, maybe humming a tune. Within hours, even the thickest cotton robes were dry, warm, and vaguely smelled of pine smoke and rice porridge. Modern dryers could never, and it wasn't just laundry, books too. If a scholar's manuscripts got even slightly damp, and given Korea's humidity, they often did, he'd place them gently along the warmest edge of the room. Imagine that, a Confucian student, nervously reviewing for his civil service exams, carefully laying out pages of brush-written notes beside his bedding, the ink curling slightly, the floor whispering encouragement. And of course, since space was limited, people got very creative with floor real estate. There are records of families having unspoken Ondol etiquette, rules like never step on grandma's quilt zone, don't sit on the tea leaf drying quadrant, and for the love of all things warm, do not put your sweaty socks near father's bamboo pillow. It all sounds a bit chaotic, but it wasn't. It was harmonized, like a living routine that unfolded across heated stone, every action with purpose, every inch of floor carefully considered. Kids did their homework on it. Elders napped. Women prepared bundles of medicinal herbs to cure that mysterious winter cough everyone got around January 3rd. Meals were eaten here, chess played, stories told, dreams had. The floor was everything. Your living room, your bed, your office, your therapy mat, your cat's favorite nap spot. All in one. Let me drop tonight's quirky historical gem. Some traditional homes used Ondol warmth to ferment food. Kimchi, soy paste, even rice wine. They'd place the jars near the hottest parts of the floor for ideal stable temperatures. So yes, you could be sleeping on a floor that was also helping prepare next month's side dishes. Honestly, that's the dream. There's a saying from an 18th century household diary, "When my feet are warm, my kimchi ripens faster." Poetic, practical, peak priorities. You shift again, and maybe for just a second you can smell something bubbling faintly in an earthen pot in the next room. Spicy, savory, steamed to perfection on heat channeled through stone. You don't get that with baseboard radiators. And as you sink deeper into the rhythm of this Ondol-centered life, you realize this wasn't just architecture, it was philosophy. The belief that warmth could be more than temperature, that it could be connection. A family literally grounded together, sharing meals, stories, germs, warmth. A perfectly imperfect tangle of limbs and lives on one big heated canvas. Some historians still debate how Korean domestic life became so centered around the Ondol, especially when other advanced heating systems around the world never became quite so intimate. Roman hypocausts, for example, were mostly limited to public baths or fancy villas. Chinese kang beds were raised separate from the rest of the home, but the Korean Ondol, it brought the heat into life, down to earth, humble, inviting, almost invisible, but always present. And here you are, lying exactly where meals were shared, where winter garments were softened, where babies crawled and old men sipped tea with trembling hands. The ghosts of 1,000 small domestic acts drift past you, warm as breath. And now you're part of it too. Another quiet body resting on stone that remembers. Another person trusting that the warmth will stay just long enough. So as the night deepens and the air cools outside those paper windows, you remain here, nested in heat, surrounded by memories, halfway between a nap and a time machine. You don't need to move. You're doing enough. The floor's got this. It's hard to believe that something as simple as a floor could carry so much meaning, but here you are, still serene, sunk into history itself, and the stones beneath you are doing what they've done for generations, holding people up, quietly and completely. And as we drift further into the cozy maze of the Ondol's legacy, we come to a truly fascinating point in time, its transformation from rural tradition to a modern national symbol. Because this wasn't just about staying warm anymore. The Ondol became an identity, a metaphor, even a bit of soft diplomacy. Let me take you to the early 20th century. Picture Korea under occupation. It's the 1920s. Life is tense, controlled. But inside Korean homes, the Ondol is still doing its thing, refusing to be modernized, erased, or flattened by imported Western furniture trends. Because no matter how many foreign dignitaries visited, or how many chairs were introduced, Koreans kept sitting on the floor. It baffled outsiders. Why, they asked, would anyone choose to sit cross-legged, knees cracking on heated stone, when you could have, gasp, a couch? The answer, of course, wasn't in the furniture. It was in the feeling, because the Ondol wasn't just a floor. By now it had become a symbol of intimacy and resistance. To enter a traditional Korean home, especially in rural areas, you had to remove your shoes. Step barefoot or sock-footed onto that smooth, warm surface. Immediately, your posture changed. Your voice lowered. You were grounded, literally and socially. You didn't strut through a room on an Ondol. You lowered yourself into it. Dinner was served on low tables. Elders reclined with a groan. Children napped right where they'd been playing. It was a democracy of posture, everyone equalized by heat and gravity. Here's a little-known historical twist. When Western architects came to Korea in the 1950s to help with reconstruction, many were puzzled by the locals' stubborn insistence on keeping floor-based living spaces. But eventually, they gave in, and in some cases, even fell in love with the design. There's a story of one American advisor who, after a winter working in Korea, returned home and wrote, "Central heating feels like being yelled at by air. The Ondol feels like being hugged by the earth." If you've ever stood next to a noisy hotel radiator, you know exactly what he meant. But modernization was coming slowly but surely. In the 60s and 70s, concrete floors replaced stone slabs. Hot water pipes started replacing smoke channels. It was safer, yes, more efficient, less smoky. But something shifted. A little of the ritual was lost. Now, the heating could be controlled by a switch. Less wood to chop, less soot to clean. Also, fewer excuses to nap. Still, many households held on to the practice. You'll find modern Korean apartments today with underfloor heating systems called gudeul, which are essentially Ondol's high-tech grandkids. Same principle, same warmth, and guess what? People still sleep on the floor, not because they have to, because they like to, because there's a kind of quiet dignity in pressing your back against the same type of warmth your great-great-grandparents once relied on. You, of course, are already sold. Lying here, you start to feel like an honorary member of this lineage. You understand in a wordless way why this tradition refused to vanish, why modern Koreans still curl up on the floor during cold January nights, sipping barley tea and watching old dramas, because it isn't just about heat, it's about memory, muscle memory, family memory, cultural memory. A whole way of being that says, you don't have to climb higher to feel better, you just need to get closer to the ground. Tonight's delightfully mundane detail, in sum. Korean homes, pets have their own mini Ondol mats. Cats especially will flop dramatically onto the warmest part of the room and refuse to move until spring. One dog reportedly figured out how to paw at the thermostat until the floor reached optimal belly toast temperature. Truly, we are all just mammals chasing warmth. So, as we linger in this cozy chapter of the past, you might be wondering, will the Ondol survive another 100 years? Well, judging by the wave of global architects now reintroducing radiant floor heating as a modern luxury, I'd say yes. But to Koreans, it was never a trend. It was the heartbeat of home. And here, nestled in that rhythm, you stretch a little. Your shoulders gently sinking, your spine smiling. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud, just heat, just history, just you. By now, you're so attuned to the floor's quiet embrace that if someone offered you a regular bed, you'd probably refuse it politely, and then lay right back down with a contented sigh. The Ondol's magic has worked on you. No alarms, no announcements. Just warmth and the quiet pull of the past threading its way around your limbs like a soft blanket woven from time. And as we stay here, resting yet traveling, we begin to trace the broader ripples of Ondol beyond Korea's borders, because, believe it or not, this humble heating system didn't just warm homes, it quietly influenced architecture across the globe. Let's start with something that may surprise you. South Korea was instrumental in popularizing radiant floor heating worldwide. In the late 20th century, as Korea's economy boomed and its construction industry expanded, architects began exporting the Ondol's modern descendant, hot water-based underfloor heating, known locally as Ondol, but internationally as hydronic radiant systems. This approach began to inspire home builders far beyond the peninsula. Scandinavians loved it. The Swiss swooned. Even luxury developers in North America and the UK started, touting radiant floors as an eco-friendly, sleek way to heat minimalist homes. Little did they know, a concept first used to keep villagers from freezing in Joseon-era huts was now trending in billion-dollar ski chalets. Tonight's lesser-known historical twist: in the 1988 Seoul Olympics, Ondol was a secret star. Athletes and journalists from around the world arrived in Korea and discovered the floors were warm. Some were confused, some delighted. Some allegedly canceled their hotel upgrades to stay in Ondol-style guest houses. One Canadian runner reportedly said, "This is like sleeping on a hug." He later ran a personal best. Coincidence? We think not. And it wasn't just the architecture that spread. It was the philosophy of groundedness. As the global wellness movement gained momentum, ideas rooted in balance, simplicity, and connection to the earth began resonating louder. Floor seating, floor sleeping, minimalist homes. Suddenly, what was once old-fashioned was now intentional. And Korea? It had been living that way all along. You might say Korea had floor culture before it was cool. Of course, as with all things exported, some misinterpretations occurred. There were luxury spa resorts that installed heated marble floors and called it Zen Ondol. There were yoga studios advertising floor fusion therapy. No one really knew what that meant. And yes, at least one designer in Milan tried to create a line of floorwear, high-end outfits tailored to look stylish while lying down. Reviews were mixed, but the heart of Ondol wasn't in the marketing. It was in the quiet logic of the system, the way it used gravity, convection, and common sense to create something close to perfect. And let's not forget its climate efficiency. Modern architects still marvel at how the Ondol concept uses less energy than traditional forced air systems. Since heat rises naturally, it warms the body at floor level first, right where you want it. Why blast warm air at your ceiling when you could start from the toes up? It's like the floor saying, "No worries, I'll take it from here." So, here's tonight's quirky, modern truth. You can now buy electric Ondol pads for your home. They're portable, adjustable, and some even come with Bluetooth controls, which means yes, there are people right now lying on their floors, sipping tea, adjusting their floor temperature from their smartphones. You don't get more futuristic grandma than that. And in high-rise Korean apartments today, radiant floor systems are so common that children grow up thinking of heated floors as just normal, which, let's be honest, should be the standard for everyone. Because truly, once your backside has known the joy of a perfectly warm tile, how do you go back? As you breathe deeper, sinking further into this journey, you realize something beautiful. You're not just visiting a tradition, you're participating in it. Right now, in the soft hush of night, you're doing what countless others have done for centuries. Not rushing, not worrying, just resting. On a floor designed to make that possible. The lights outside are dimming. The air feels cooler against the windows. But not for you. For you, the world is gently glowing under your back. and everything beyond the edges of this floor. Your inbox, your errands, your existential worries melts into background fuzz. Right now, it's just you, and a system that's been perfecting relaxation since the Iron Age. You shift a little, just slightly, and the warmth adjusts with you, like it's listening, like the floor itself has ears and a kindly disposition. And maybe, after all this time together, it kind of does, because by now, the Ondol has taken on a personality in your mind. It's no longer just stone or pipe. It's the host of this entire journey. Quiet, constant, patient. And as we approach the final chapters of this story, there's one more thread to follow. How the Ondol shaped Korean life far beyond just heating the house. We're talking etiquette, relationships, even interior design rules that, all surprise, float up from the floor. Let's start with a simple question. Why do Koreans sit, sleep, eat, and even socialize on the floor? Sure, the heat helps, but it's more than that. Floor living became a way to organize space, emotion, and even hierarchy. In a traditional Korean home, the warmest part of the Ondol, the innermost section farthest from the door, was the most honored. It was called the Onbang, and it was usually reserved for elders or important guests. You didn't just plop down anywhere, there was floor protocol. A child wouldn't dare stretch their legs toward an elder. Guests would sit modestly near the cooler edge of the room unless invited inward. Even the way people poured drinks, kneeling using both hands, was influenced by the way everyone shared the floor. Tonight's unexpected fun fact, there was such a thing as Ondol manners. Yep, a whole etiquette system built around how you behaved while living floor-bound, sprawling too wide. Rude, wearing shoes on the warm stone. Social felony, dozing off during a guest's visit because the floor was too comfy, understandable, but frowned upon. And let's not forget, you were expected to clean your feet, because if you're going to plop down cheek to floor, so to speak, it better be a clean cheek. This low-altitude lifestyle also led to an entirely different way of decorating. Westerns. Rooms often feature high-backed chairs, vertical storage, tall lamps. But in a traditional Ondol room, everything hugs the floor. Tables are squat and circular. Bedding rolls up into cabinets. Even lighting comes from floor lamps or lanterns tucked into corners. It's a world designed to be navigated horizontally. Some Western visitors in the early 20th century called it childlike or primitive. But the longer they stayed, the more they started napping and changing and sighing deeply over barley tea at 3 p.m. Funny how peace sneaks up on you when you stop trying to sit above everything. And this had ripple effects socially too. Floor living is deeply democratic. You sit in a circle. You can't loom over others. Even the richest scholar and the humblest farmer were subject to the same ground rules, literally. It's hard to be haughty with warm knees and a cat curled up next to your bowl of rice. One scholar once mused, perhaps Koreans are polite, not just because of Confucius, but because of their floors. And honestly, he may have been onto something, because when you have to kneel to serve tea and bow to enter a room and warm yourself the same way as everyone else, the ego gets softened, like clay warming in the kiln. So here's tonight's charming little oddity. Even modern Korean wedding ceremonies often include elements of Ondol culture. In some, the bride and groom kneel on soft mats and pour each other tea. Right on the floor, there's a quiet intimacy to it, like saying, we're building this life from the ground up. Literally, back in your room, wherever it is in space and time, you now feel the echoes of that humility, that care. Lying here, you feel like a quiet guest in someone's memory, and it's not just the architecture, it's the emotional logic of the Ondol. It tells you, be still, be low, be warm, and while you're at it, stay a while. So you do. You stay. The lights could flicker. The winds could howl. But down here, you're unbothered, swaddled by ancient design, held by centuries of domestic wisdom This is the kind of comfort you don't invent overnight. You earn it over generations, and tonight, it's yours. Somewhere in the quiet, a clock ticks. Or maybe it's just your heartbeat syncing with the hum of the floor. You've been here for a while now, not just lying on a warm surface, but wrapped in a philosophy, one that says comfort doesn't need to be loud, expensive, or dramatic. Sometimes all it takes is heat, humility, and horizontal thinking. And now, as we reach the soft close of this journey, let's visit one final chapter, the Ondol in the modern Korean soul. Because for all the science, engineering, and architectural innovation, it's the emotional core of the Ondol that lingers. It's where people return when they need rest, healing, or just a quiet moment to stare at the ceiling and think about absolutely nothing. First, tonight's beautiful truth, Ondol is still how most Koreans heat their homes today. It's not a relic, it's not quaint, it's default. Every winter, from high-rise apartments in Seoul to country homes nestled near pine-covered hills, the floors come alive. Parents brew barley tea while their kids do homework sprawled across cozy pads. Grandparents nap with books on their chests. Dogs, cats, and sometimes rebellious toddlers claim the toastiest corners. If there's a universal Korean memory, it probably smells faintly of rice, feels like cotton pajamas, and sounds like soft breathing on a warm floor. There's even a word in Korean, nuryumjip. It loosely means a home where the warmth lingers. Not just temperature warmth, but emotional residue. The kind that makes you sigh before you even sit down. The kind that says, you don't need to be useful here, just be. Here's tonight's last light chuckle. There's an entire genre of Korean YouTube dedicated to Ondol living. People live stream themselves doing absolutely nothing, just sipping tea, flipping magazines, maybe petting a corgi on the floor. Millions of views, no drama, no jump cuts, no special effects. Just people being still. Imagine explaining that to your stressed out podcast binging coworker. Oh yeah, I watched a guy fold socks for 90 minutes while his Ondol clicked quietly in the background. Best evening of the week. And now, the room around you softens, not visually, but emotionally. Like your body knows this journey is landing. You feel it in the way your shoulders release, your hands unclench, your thoughts lose their sharp corners. The story's not ending exactly. It's just becoming background warmth, which, if you think about it, is the most Ondol thing it could do. So before you drift off completely, take this with you. You've been part of something ancient, not just a system, but a gesture, a collective decision by a whole people over thousands of years that warmth matters, that it should begin from the ground up, that it should be quiet, and it should be shared. The floor under you doesn't ask questions. It doesn't need thanks. It simply gives every night, every winter, every weary body that lies down and whispers, just for a moment. And now you too become part of the tradition. Another soul in another quiet room. Feet warm, breathing slow. Thoughts softened to gentle static. You've traveled far, from smoky Iron Age huts to satellite-wired Seoul condos, and yet through it all, the heat remained. The floor stayed kind. So rest now. Let the story fade. Let the floor hold you. Let tomorrow wait. Because tonight, you're in a house where the warmth lingers and nothing more is needed.